I just met with Chief Crowley and removed her as fire chief.
LA Mayor Karen Bass makes that announcement after sitting down with us earlier in the week.
Although there were warnings that I frankly wasn't aware of.
Jon Regardie is a freelance reporter who covers City Hall.
Absolutely, I think your interview with Bass made this happen faster.
It's her first extensive TV sit-down since the Palisades fire began.
There's been so much said about you,
Yes.
but not a lot from you.
Why did she go to Ghana with dangerous winds in the forecast?
I felt absolutely terrible not being here for my city.
What happened during that Sky News interview when she said nothing for minutes?
That is unfortunate because I see the way that looks.
And what about her political future?
And are you still enjoying this job, and are you still committed to running for re-election?
Then protesters interrupt U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy as he launches an investigation into California's high-speed rail. We talk with him. Plus, a new sheriff
to be the next governor of California.
Race for California governor.
Broadcasting across California, you're watching The Issue Is.
And welcome to The Issue Is. I'm Elex Michelson. At the beginning of this week, we sat down with LA Mayor Karen Bass, where she raised serious questions about the performance of LA Fire Chief Kristen Crowley. That interview got as much attention as anything we've ever done, picked up by outlets all over the world. By the end of the week, Crowley was fired.
I just met with Chief Crowley and removed her as fire chief.
The mayor says Chief Crowley refused to participate in an after-action report on the fires that she says was mandatory.
We all know that 1,000 firefighters that could have been on duty on the morning the fires broke were instead sent home on Chief Crowley's watch. These actions required her removal.
Was the budget cut, Chief?
Yes, it was cut, and it did impact our ability to provide service.
Days into the firefight, Crowley told my colleague Gigi Graciette that Mayor Bass was responsible for cutting the fire department's budget, something Bass disputes.
The fire department was not cut. I have done 2 budgets in my time here. In both budgets, the budget was increased.
The mayor says Crowley will continue to work for the department in a lower rank. Recently retired Chief Deputy Ronnie Villanueva will serve as interim chief as Mayor Bass leads a national search for a permanent leader.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am humbled by your confidence in me.
Mayor Bass, always good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you as well.
Earlier this week, we sat down with Mayor Bass in Culver City as she toured one of 4 recovery centers set up for impacted workers and families.
I want people to know that if you worked in the area, in a home or on the property or in any of the businesses, or you were impacted by the fires, you can come here.
I've been asking for a one-on-one since day one of the fires.
There's been so much said about you,
Yes.
but not a lot from you necessarily on some of this in this sort of format. So I want to give you a chance to say, in your words, what was going through your mind during a lot of these big moments.
Sure, and let me just begin by saying, while the city was burning, and then right after the fires were barely put out, we moved into rains and mudslides. Yeah. And during all of that time, I did not think the focus should be on me. I thought the focus should be on the city and the people that were suffering.
Here's the timeline of what happened. January 2nd, National Weather Service warns on X of the potential for moderate to strong Santa Ana winds in extreme fire conditions next Tuesday through Thursday. January 4th, Bass leaves for Ghana. Then President Joe Biden had asked her to represent the U.S. at the inauguration of Ghana's new president. When Bass was in Congress, she was chair of the Africa Subcommittee. January 6th, with the mayor in Ghana, her office posts this on X, quote, "There is an expected destructive and potentially life-threatening windstorm starting Tuesday morning through Wednesday afternoon." January 7th, Bass attends the swearing-in of Ghana's president. Hours later, the Palisades fire breaks out. Mayor Bass quickly heads home to L.A. and receives her first call all week from Crowley. January 8th, Bass is back in L.A., appearing in the Palisades with Governor Gavin Newsom and Senator Alex Padilla.
There's the decision to go to Ghana, which I know you've said was a mistake now. But I just am curious on the thought process behind it.
Right.
Because we know that there was warnings about the weather before you went, and you still went. What was the thought process behind going to Ghana?
So let me just tell you a couple of things. First of all, when the White House called and asked me if I would represent the president, I said yes. It was going to be a very, very short trip, over a weekend and 2 business days. We need to look at everything about the preparation and all of that for the fires, because I think when we evaluate that, we will find that although there were warnings that I frankly wasn't aware of, although there were warnings, I think our preparation wasn't what it typically is, meaning that before there's a major weather event, for example, last week when we knew we were going to get into the rains, you saw us come together and us talk about, get your sandbags, bring the K-rails out. That type of preparation didn't happen. If that had, I will tell you, Elex, I wouldn't have even gone to San Diego, let alone leave the country.
But what do you mean there were warnings you weren't aware of? Because I know we were talking about it on the news. A lot of people were talking about the problems.
From the city, from the county, that level of preparation really didn't happen. So it didn't reach that level to me to say something terrible could happen and maybe you shouldn't have gone on the trip.
Why didn't
But
it
to
happen?
me, I don't know. I mean, I think that that's one of the things we need to look at. So 2 investigations are taking place. One internal to the city, and that's the Fire Commission, because that's mandated by the city charter. So the commission will hire an outside entity to examine everything, the pre-deployment, why were firefighters sent home, all of that should have taken place that didn't. And then also the governor has contracted with the Fire Safety Research Institute, which is a national institute that investigated what happened in the fires in Maui. So everything that happened, including that, needs to be examined. But I will tell you that I felt absolutely terrible not being here for my city and not being here for my family, who was impacted by the fires as well. And so when I say it was a mistake, absolutely, the idea that I was not present was very painful.
Bass expanded upon one point about Crowley during this news conference.
What I can tell you is that what has happened in the 2+ years I've been here, every time there was a weather emergency or even a hint of a weather emergency, the chief has called me directly. She has my cell phone. She knows she can call me 24/7. And she briefed me, and then we would talk about what needed to happen next. That did not happen this time.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning?
When Bass arrived in L.A. after her trip to Ghana, a Sky News reporter approached her, asking questions for several minutes. She was silent.
Have you nothing to say today?
On the way back, there's this Sky News reporter that comes up to you, sort of ambushes you, right?
Yes,
with the phone,
he did.
with the phone in your face, and that clip has gone mega viral.
Right.
And we know you didn't respond to him in the time.
Right.
What was going through your mind, and why the decision not to respond?
Well, I will tell you, yes, it was an ambush, and I wasn't sure who he was. And that is unfortunate, because I see the way that looks, as though I was avoiding. But when you're getting off a plane and you've been on a plane 17 hours and somebody hits you with a camera, I wish in hindsight my response had been better.
There are also questions about an empty 117 million gallon reservoir closed for more than a year for repairs. During the fire, several fire hydrants in the Pacific Palisades ran out of water.
I will tell you that the fire hydrant situation is also something that has to be examined. The reservoir, as you know, was a reservoir for drinking water. The reason why it was empty, it was mandated by the state to be emptied because there was a tear in the cover. In the best of all worlds, one of the things that was so difficult in the fires were the hurricane force winds that the planes could not fly in. So even if the the reservoir had been filled, they wouldn't have been able to have used that. But the fire hydrant issue is something that is a whole separate investigation. It's a combination between the DWP and the fire department. The fire department inspects the fire hydrants. The DWP repairs them.
How do we change all of these things going forward at a time when we have so many challenges as a city to begin with?
Well, you know what? It raised with me an evaluation of the entire emergency management system in our city, the weaknesses. And I think that that's something that we have to look at as a region, the city and the county. We're preparing for these international events. And so I am in the process of evaluating all of that.
What's a realistic time frame for people to actually start rebuilding and actually get home?
Well, you know, I'm hoping that the rebuilding and the planning process can actually start now. But you know that's going to be individuals. People are in a variety of different circumstances. We have seniors who might have paid off their mortgage years ago and are living on, fixed incomes. We have people that want to rebuild exactly as they built before. other people who might want to make changes, which then the process would be a little longer for. So what I understand is 3 years would probably be the fastest, but probably it would be more like 5. So it really depends on the individual circumstances.
When people hear 3 to 5 years, Governor Newsom was talking about the idea of a year.
I don't know about that,
Yeah.
but I think that what we can do in a year, or maybe a little bit longer, are the temporary structures that we would put in the commercial area.
What is your main message to the people of Los Angeles at this incredibly perilous time for our city?
My main message is we are going to recover. We're going to rebuild. And for the people of Palisades, I am going to stay on this until everybody that chooses to go back is able to rebuild. And I am going to do everything I can in my power to expedite the rebuilding, but we also have excellent cooperation from the governor and from our state legislators and from our federal legislators. They've all been here. The governor is passing executive orders to help with the expediting the things that I can't do on a local level. So your government will be united, the private sector will be working with us, and we will get through this because LA always does.
And are you still enjoying this job, and are you still committed to running for re-election?
I am absolutely. I mean, I ran for a purpose. I knew I would face challenges. I've been through disasters before in terms of living in the city, and I've had major challenges, whether I was in Congress or in the State House, and so yes.
And yes, you're still committed to running for re-election.
I'm still committed to running for re-election. I'm still committed to doing this job every single day.
Mayor Karen Bass, thank you so much for the time.
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it. Always appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You can watch the full interview at youtube.com/Elex Michelson or at the Issue Is podcast. There is a lot to unpack there. Standing by right now is City Hall reporter Jon Regardie. He's with us to break it all down when we come back.
How did the meeting go?
It was very brief.
That's LA Mayor Karen Bass talking about her brief conversation with LA Fire Chief Kristen Crowley that resulted in Crowley losing her job. What a week in the history of LA politics. Jon Regardie is a freelance reporter who covers City Hall as well as anyone. His writings featured in LA Magazine, the West Side Current, and other outlets. Jon joins us now. Welcome to The Issue Is.
Thank you. Man, you have been in the thick of it. I mean, Alex, that interview that you got with her was extraordinary. I mean, you did. I really do think that's what precipitated this.
What's your big takeaway from the mayor firing the fire chief?
You know, this was in one way extraordinary. Her comment, she was a way I've not seen her before, very terse, very direct. But this is something everyone knew was coming. It was not a question of if, but it was really a question of when. If we go back to 3 days after the fire started, when she appeared and spoke with your Gigi Graciette and made all those criticisms, at that point it was clear that it was going to be over. She would not be the fire chief for the foreseeable future. The question was just when was it going to be? And it turned out to be today.
Jon, what do you think was the impact of our interview with Mayor Bass this week here on The Issue Is?
You brought up the point, and you gave her the situation where she talked about the thing that's been very head-scratching to everyone, seemingly unaware of the situation. So many people in Los Angeles were fully aware of, what these winds would bring. It was very curious, the questions and comments about, not being informed. You definitely did set the ball rolling with this.
So the mayor's perhaps loudest critic is the person who ran against her last time, and that is Rick Caruso. Interesting what he put out on X following this decision to fire Crowley. Quote, "It's very disappointing that Mayor Bass has decided to fire Chief Crowley. Chief Crowley served LA well and spoke honestly about the severe and profoundly ill-conceived budget cuts the Bass administration made the LAFD. That courage to speak the truth was brave, and I admire her. Honesty in a high city official should not be a firing offense. The mayor's decision to ignore the warnings and leave the city was hers alone." So I met up with Caruso earlier this week at the Grove to talk about his new nonprofit, which is called Steadfast LA. They announced that they are giving away 80 to 100 pre-built homes by Samara for fire victims. And so I asked Caruso about the politics of all that. There are some people that are going to say
This is great PR for you. This is great for a potential political run. And this is all a way to promote you. What do you say to that?
I say to that, grow up and think about what's happening here.
What do you make of what Rick Caruso is really doing here?
I think two things can be true at once. He can absolutely be looking to help people, and he has the wealth to do it. And he can also 100% be looking toward the political future. You know, we referenced, things on Fox 11, and that very first night of the fires, he was calling in. He has been outspoken. He has been critical. He's not yet copped to, will he run for mayor? Will he run for governor? But he clearly seems to be leaving the door open for one of those. And this comment so quickly after the announcement just adds to it. He'll be in our future and on our screens for a long time to come.
So Mayor Bass says that she is going to run for re-election. She had already declared for that. She says she's still going forward. How would you describe her chances right now?
We have to remember that the election is 15 months away. There's been a lot of criticism, but that's a long, long, long time. It gives her plenty of opportunity to rebound. And look, if we are a year from now and we see a sizable rebuilding effort, if we see ads with homes being under construction and benefits for a lot of the fire victims, she will be in a much better place. But for sure, it's a lot of work to do, and there will be a lot of, fire directed at her when that campaign starts.
Yep. She thought for a while it might just be a cruise to re-election, and it certainly does not seem like it's going to be like that now. Jon Regardie, thanks so much for all your great reporting and appreciate your insights.
Thank you, Alex.
Up next here on The Issue is a crazy moment in the history of California's high-speed rail. We're in the middle of a wild confrontation at LA's Union Station. George W. Bush was president when California voters passed Prop 1A to build high-speed rail in California. The trains still aren't running in 2025. This week, we were on hand for a wild debate about the project's future, featuring the new U.S. Secretary of Transportation and some very loud protesters.
Today, we are severely, no pun intended, off track.
Soon after, U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy and Republicans announce a probe into California's high-speed rail system, protests begin.
Worst public infrastructure failure in U.S. history.
Activists at LA's Union Station chant, "Build that rail."
Democracy is almost dead.
One dressed as a dinosaur. Another appears to throw a tomato at a Republican assembly member.
I think they were chanting, "Build the rail." It's been 17 years and $16 billion, and no rail has been built. So if you want to go protest somewhere, if you want to shout at someone, go to the governor's mansion. Go talk to Democrats.
Back in 2008, California voters passed Proposition 1A, promising a high-speed train from San Francisco to L.A. by 2020 at a cost of $33 billion. Now, the hope is to connect Merced to Bakersfield by 2030 to 2033, and the entire project is about $100 billion over budget.
This is a boondoggle.
I've ridden on rail probably more than all of you combined.
Back in December 2023, then-President Joe Biden allocated about $4 billion to continue the project. On that day, I spoke via Zoom with former Governor Jerry Brown and former Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Biden likes trains.
We need these jobs.
Now, a different president with a very different view.
The worst overruns that there have ever been in the history of our country.
President Trump launching a, quote, compliance review to see if that $4 billion federal investment should go forward.
Is there any way you could see where you do want to spend the $4 billion and go forward with this, or is this sort of box checking to end the project?
What I see here, it's going to be a hard stretch to see how those promises were kept by how this money was spent.
The High-Speed Rail Authority wouldn't agree to an interview, but sent us this statement, quote, "We welcome this investigation and the opportunity to work with our federal partners. California's high-speed rail is 171 miles under active construction with over 50 major structures completed, 14,700 jobs created, and more than 880 small businesses engaged."
We spent all this money already. Is there anything we can get out of it? And what is your sort of vision for what high-speed rail in California could actually look like?
That's a great question for Gavin Newsom. What should you do with this project?
The governor also didn't agree to an interview on camera, but his team referred me to this.
Just finished a meeting with President Trump.
When the governor visited the White House in early February, he discussed high-speed rail with President Trump.
This project's actually on the cusp of actually taking shape and moving forward in a way that he'll be proud and may even be president when that first phase is done.
Although most of the money from high-speed rail comes from California, a significant chunk has also come from the federal government, and that's where the Republican Congress members come in.
The project is just such an absolute and complete failure.
Congressman Kevin Kiley is backing legislation to kill all federal funding for the project.
Do you have the votes in the House and the Senate and the President now to effectively kill the project at the federal level?
I think we will. That's my hope. That's gotten a lot of momentum.
Republican Congressman Vince Fong says that money could then be spent on other things.
If you offered any American or any Californian the option of there's $128 billion, what would you prioritize? I guarantee you that this project would not be in the top 1,000 priorities.
Protesters are skeptical of the entire Trump administration.
We want to say no to a king and yes to high-speed rail.
This is something that will help people for generations, will help take vehicles off the road and help people have more options to get around California.
Secretary Duffy says he likes the idea of a high-speed rail line from L.A. to Vegas. Up next, the first major Republican candidate enters the race for California governor. Stay with us.
I am here to announce our campaign to be the next governor of California.
This week, Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco entered the race for California governor. He's the first major Republican to do so. He visited our studios and sat down with my colleague, Marla Tejas.
It's plain and simple. California is broken. We are failing, and we are failing our residents, our Californians. And it's not our Californians' fault. It's not the people's fault. It's government's fault.
Could be a challenge. There's been no Republican winning statewide since 2006. Thanks so much for watching this week. We end with a memorable protester at the high-speed rail event in downtown L.A.
Democracy is almost dead.